I have for some time been working on changes to the rules of procedure under which we operate in the Kansas legislature in three specific areas. One has to do with recording of the votes we take on your behalf as your representatives in the House on legislation that comes before us. One has to do with the hours we operate in open session, and one has to do with what is called bundling of bills. With regard to recording of votes, you might be surprised to learn that not all votes we take on bills and resolutions in the Kansas House are recorded votes. That is, votes where you can check and see how your representative voted on a particular bill or amendment that is important to you. Any bill that advances to what we call final action is a recorded vote, but prior to that time, we first consider the bill and any amendments to the bill and on what are called general orders in what we call the Committee of the Whole in the House. And those preliminary votes are often the votes that shape that legislation, particularly if a number of amendments are added. Those votes normally in the Kansas House right now are not recorded votes. In other words, we vote either by voice vote, aye or nay, or we vote with electronic voting, but without that vote being recorded. So you'll never know how your representative votes on measures. In most cases, you will not know how your representatives vote on those measures in the House. I think that's wrong. I think as your representative from Shawnee, you're entitled to know. You're entitled to be assured that I've always cast an informed vote, have informed myself as much as possible about the issues facing us, and then cast an informed vote, which I will report to you with regard to how I voted and why. And this practice flies in the face of that promise of accountability and transparency to you, my constituents, the voters of my district. So I proposed a rule to change that and require those votes to be recorded. It unfortunately did not pass. It came close, but it failed by a narrow margin. But we hope to be back in the future on that legislation again. But I'm happy to report that the other two rules changes that I proposed to promote accountability and transparency fared much better on the floor of the House today. Both passed. One was currently our legislative sessions can run at any hour of the day, day or night. So that means particularly late in the legislative session when we're trying to get a lot of work done so we can adjourn for the year. A number of bills, two things happen to them. They are bundled together in what are called conference committee reports, and then usually with little information about what are in those conference committee reports, a bill with parts of 6, 8, or 10 other bills in them are presented to us for vote, often well after midnight, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Well, there's two problems with that. Number one, your legislators are so bleary-eyed and exhausted that they are not fully aware or able to focus on what they're voting on. And if these bills are bundled in what I call a mega bundle with a number of bills put into one, these quite often contain legislation that we never saw in the House earlier in the session. It might be something that passed the Senate that never came to the House. That can be added in a conference committee report. So quite often we wind up voting on a number of bills very late at night that the contents of which we are unaware. That violates my promise to you that I'll be fully informed on every vote I take. Worse, because they're bundled, even if I do inform myself about what are in those conference committee reports, if there's 6 or 8 disparate pieces of legislation in that one conference committee report, I might agree with half of them and think they are good for my constituents, you folks in Shawnee, or for the people of Kansas, and I might think that 5 others are not. But I get one vote up or down without any chance of amendment, one vote. So we have to swallow bitter pills and vote for things we don't approve of in order to vote for other things we do approve of. And that's the evils of bundling. So I introduced legislation to say that no session in the Kansas House can continue after midnight, and that the practice of mega bundling of bills has to stop, that no conference committee report henceforward can have more than the bill that was in the conference committee plus one other. And those both passed by comfortable margins. I'm pleased to report, and we have today improved accountability and transparency to you, the people of Kansas, you for whom we work here in the Kansas legislature. Thank you.